A 59-year-old woman and a pizza delivery boy sounds like an ordinary encounter, right? On a quiet evening, a 59-year-old woman opened her door to greet the local pizza boy, expecting nothing more than the usual quick exchange of cash for food. But as their eyes met and a conversation sparked, the night took an unexpected turn, one that would leave the whole town buzzing with surprise. What unfolded next was anything but ordinary. What could possibly happen between them that has everyone talking? It's a tale that proves you never know where life's twists might take you. The chilly evening settled over the quiet streets of Millbrook, a small town where everything seemed to move slowly. Most houses were dark, with only a few lights glowing through the windows, and the distant hum of cars barely broke the silence. In her small, worn-down house on Elm Street, Anne sat alone at her dining table, the flickering light from an old, nearly broken television casting shadows around the room. The static on the screen made the house feel even emptier. At 59, Anne found herself in a situation she hadn't expected. Her job at the local bakery had been enough to get by, but that was before it shut down like many small shops in Millbrook. Now she struggled to make ends meet, her savings dwindling as bills piled up. In the kitchen, the cupboards were almost bare. For days, Anne had been surviving on instant noodles and a few leftover cans of beans. The fridge hummed weakly, nearly empty. Hunger gnawed at her, and the loneliness that filled the house only made it worse. Desperation drove her thoughts to Tony's Pizza, a place she hadn't ordered from in months, back when things were a little better. Without thinking too much, she picked up the phone, the hunger gnawing at her as she dialed the number, her fingers trembling slightly as she pressed each button. A pizza, just for tonight, would be a treat she desperately needed, even if she had no idea how she was going to pay for it. The phone rang a few times before a familiar, cheerful voice answered on the other end. "Tony's Pizza. What can I get for you?" The voice brought back memories of better times when ordering a pizza wasn't something that required so much thought. Anne didn't hesitate. She ordered a large pepperoni pizza with extra cheese, her usual choice. As soon as she hung up, reality hit her hard. The phone sat in her lap as the weight of what she had done settled in. There was no money left in her wallet, no cash hidden in a drawer. She hadn't even thought about how she would pay for the pizza. Her mind started racing, then a wild idea crept in, something she never would have considered in the past. It was embarrassing, and the thought made her cheeks flush with heat. But maybe it could work. Just for one night, maybe she could offer something else in exchange for the food. The idea felt risky, but with each passing minute, it seemed more like her only option. The minutes stretched on as she waited, her heart pounding in her chest. The house felt even quieter than before, the ticking of the clock growing louder with each second. Finally, the doorbell rang, echoing through the small space. Anne stood up quickly, her legs shaky beneath her. She opened the door to find a young man standing there holding a pizza box. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with dark hair that fell messily over his forehead. He wore the familiar red shirt from Tony's Pizza, and the shy smile on his face made him look even younger. "That'll be $15.50, he said, offering her the pizza with one hand. Anne's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the pizza, her mind racing for the right words. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, "I don't have any money," her eyes darting to the floor, avoiding his gaze as she spoke. The young man looked confused for a moment, unsure of what to do. This wasn't part of the routine for delivering pizzas. Before he could respond, Anne took a deep breath, trying to find the courage to say what had been on her mind. She nervously tugged at the edges of her cardigan, her face flushed with embarrassment. "But maybe we could work something out," she added, her voice barely louder than a whisper. The young man, whose name was Nick, stood there for a moment, frozen. He was just a pizza delivery guy, working long hours to make some extra cash while figuring out his future. Being in this situation wasn't something he had ever experienced, but Anne didn't seem manipulative. She seemed lonely, and something about that vulnerability made him pause for a moment. The two stood there in awkward silence. Then Anne made a move that surprised even herself. She took a step closer to him, gently touching his arm, and whispered, "Why don't you come in?" Nick, still unsure of what was happening, nodded slowly and stepped inside. The house was small but cozy, though a bit worn around the edges. Old pictures of Anne in her younger years were scattered across the walls, showing a life full of moments that seemed far away now. Nick put the pizza on the table, glancing around and feeling out of place. Anne poured them both a glass of wine, her hands trembling slightly. She didn't know what was going to happen next, but something inside her felt different. For the first time in a long time, she felt alive. Sitting across from each other, the two began talking. What started as awkward small talk about the weather turned into a deeper conversation. Nick told her about his life, how he dropped out of college, didn't have a solid plan, and was just trying to get by. Anne listened intently, feeling a connection to his struggles. She shared some of her own stories, the bakery she used to work at, and how she'd been on her own for so long since her divorce. The hours passed, and before they knew it, they had finished the bottle of wine, the pizza set cold on the table, forgotten in the midst of their conversation. They laughed, talked about their dreams and disappointments, and somewhere in the middle of it all, the initial reason for Nick's visit seemed to fade away. The tension between them shifted, and despite her age, Anne felt a spark she hadn't felt in years. Nick, on the other hand, was seeing something he hadn't expected. It wasn't just about physical attraction anymore. There was something about Anne, her vulnerability, her kindness, that drew him in. Without thinking, Nick leaned forward, gently placing his hand over hers. Anne looked up, her eyes meeting his, and for the first time in years, she felt seen. Not as an older woman or someone struggling to make ends meet, but as a person with desires and emotions that had been buried for far too long. In the dim light of her bedroom, their hands found each other with unexpected tenderness. Nick's touch was gentle, tracing the lines of her skin as if discovering a hidden story. Anne's heart raced as they moved closer, the quiet between them filling with soft anticipation. Their lips met again, this time with more urgency, a spark igniting between them. The world outside faded, and in that moment, nothing else mattered but the warmth they shared, the unspoken need drawing them together. As the night stretched on in a quiet, intimate embrace, they didn't just share the warmth of each other's company. Something deeper blossomed between them. Nick stayed, and they spent the night together, not out of obligation or desperation, but because they both wanted to. The morning light streamed through the curtains, and Anne woke up feeling a strange mix of emotions. She hadn't planned for any of this to happen, but there, next to her, was Nick, still fast asleep, looking peaceful. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone anymore. Over the next few weeks, Nick continued visiting. At first, it was just casual, bringing over pizzas, hanging out, and talking about life. But slowly, their bond grew stronger. What had started as a random moment of desperation had turned into something more meaningful. Anne wasn't blind to the differences between them. She knew people would talk if they found out about their relationship, a woman her age with a man so much younger. It wasn't something that was often accepted, but she didn't care. For the first time in years, she was happy, truly happy. Nick, too, felt something he hadn't expected. At first, he thought it would just be a one-time thing, but as he spent more time with Anne, he realized he genuinely cared for her. It wasn't just about the physical connection anymore. He admired her strength, her resilience, and the way she made him feel understood. Their relationship, though unconventional, worked. They found comfort in each other's company, and Anne, who had been so used to the silence of her home, now had someone who filled it with laughter and warmth. And Nick, who had been lost, now had someone who made him feel like he mattered. As the months passed, they faced challenges. There were moments of doubt, moments when Anne worried about the future. Would Nick eventually want someone younger? Would their age difference become too much to handle? But every time those doubts crept in, Nick reassured her. It wasn't a typical love story. It wasn't the kind of romance that people read about in books or saw in movies. But for Anne and Nick, it was real. They had found something in each other that neither of them had been looking for, but now couldn't imagine living without. In the end, it wasn't about the pizza, the money, or even the unusual way their relationship had started. It was about two people who, against all odds, found love when they least expected it. Cheating, secrets,